A thin mist curls along the dirt lanes of the village, clinging to the uneven stones
Please,
and the
Father,
ragged
you must
edges
help
of
us.
thatched roofs, heavy with the scent of rotting hay and the acrid smoke from sparse hearths. Each breath of wind carries a damp chill, sinking into the bones of those who wander through the morning's gray silence. Children huddle beneath threadbare blankets, their small hands clasped around knees, eyes wide and hollow, attuned to the slightest disturbance. A crow's distant caw, the scrape of a wooden pail against frost-crusted earth, the subtle groan of the soil as it contracts beneath the morning cold. Their faces are pale, lips chapped, fingers cracked, but the alertness in their gaze belies the fragility of their bodies. Even in the face of hunger, they are watchful, waiting. Women kneel over the embers of fire pits, coaxing warmth from blackened coals that resist life. Smoke curls upward, swirling in tight, desperate spirals before vanishing into the mist. Their hands, raw from labor and cold, rake at ashes that give little but heatless sparks, and their murmured prayers blend with the hiss of dying embers. Men return from the fields, bent beneath invisible loads, shoulders bowed as though the air itself weighs upon them. The earth, once generous, now offers nothing but frost and mud, the black soil cracked and unyielding. Their eyes meet briefly with their wives, a shared glance that carries the weight of unspoken failure, of dreams of harvests that will never come. The Lord's tax collectors have already visited, their heavy boots leaving impressions not only in the mud but in the hearts of the villagers. Ledgers, inked in cruel precision, record sums impossible to pay, each numeral a silent hammer pounding fear into the marrow. Coins are scarce, barter is gone. Faith, stretched thin like the brittle walls of their cottages, clings stubbornly. In the low, smoke-darkened rafters, whispered prayers drift upward, faint as breath, carrying words that tremble on the edge of despair. God, keep us. Saints, protect us. Let it not be our end. Even the devout wonder if prayer alone can ward off the shadows pressing close against their fragile lives. Outside, the wind carries the echo of famine through the village, a mournful symphony in minor chords. It rustles the remnants of straw, whistles through broken fences, and lifts the scent of frozen bread left to crack in the cold. Near the riverbank, dogs scavenge, low growls vibrating through ribs, nostrils flaring to catch the faintest scent of warmth or decay. Their cries are carried, stretched thin across the mist, punctuating the silence that has settled like a suffocating blanket. Even the birds fly lower, wings heavy, unwilling to expend energy in empty skies. Life is cautious here, measured in the slow ticking of hours that stretch too long and give too little. Yet, within this desolation, a fragile symbol of resilience endures. Above the village well, a tattered rope suspends a small, dented bell, its surface scarred by years of use and weather. The bell swings slightly with the wind, a muted rhythm against the howl of the elements. It is a call to the living, a reminder that despite the chill, the hunger, the weight of impossible debts, there remains a pulse of togetherness. Villagers, drawn to the bell, converge in whispered groups, faces drawn and pale, yet still searching for warmth in one another's presence. The bell's note is faint but clear, a solitary voice cutting through the fog, speaking of endurance, of the small courage that remains when everything else has fallen silent. A child, no older than 7, steps forward, tiny hands trembling as they grip the rope. Lips press against the icy metal, the cold biting, but the gesture is reverent, deliberate. Eyes, wide and reflecting both despair and a glimmer of hope, look toward the mist-shrouded horizon. Around them, the village seems to pause, collective breath held, as if the very act of touching the bell has summoned a memory of life before the famine, before the endless tally of losses. In that moment, The child is both witness and participant, carrying the silent prayers of a village that refuses to disappear. Their small fingers release the rope, letting the bell swing, and the note that escapes is imperfect, ragged, yet alive. A voice of continuity in a world fraying at the edges. Inside the cottages, firelight dances on rough-hewn walls, catching glints of determination in eyes previously dulled by hunger. Mothers pull their children close, murmuring words that are equal parts reassurance and command. Fathers stare into the darkness beyond the hearth, hands clenched at their sides, imagining ways to coax sustenance from soil that resists them. The village breathes as one organism, each heartbeat synchronized to the rhythms of survival, each life a testament to endurance in the face of relentless adversity. Shadows lengthen and retreat, painting the interior spaces in stark contrasts, whispering tales of those who came before and of those who will follow. The mist begins to lift, a subtle shift in the air, revealing more of the skeletal trees lining the village paths, their branches clawing skyward as though in silent protest. The frost glitters on every surface, each shard a frozen echo of a day yet lived. Through this brittle landscape, the villagers move cautiously, guided by memory and instinct, hands outstretched to steady themselves, to lift a fallen tool, to catch the stumble of a neighbor. Every step is deliberate, every motion a negotiation with the unforgiving earth. In their quiet endurance lies a beauty, a poetry born not of abundance, but of necessity. Night approaches, and with it a darkness that carries both threat and solace. The wind grows sharper, cutting through layers of cloth and hope alike. Yet, inside the cottages, the flicker of emberlight becomes a covenant against the encroaching cold, a reminder that warmth, however fleeting, persists. Outside, the bell, now still, hangs as a sentinel, a witness to the lives unfolding beneath it. The child's gaze remains fixed on it, reflecting a mind already learning that survival is more than flesh and blood. It is a rhythm, a ritual, a story passed from one pair of eyes to another, from one small act of courage to the next. In these shadowed homes, in the mist-laden streets, in the frost that crackles underfoot, the village is suspended between despair and the first fragile hints of hope. The people are exhausted, their bodies frail, their hearts heavy, yet in the small gestures, a shared loaf of bread, a whispered prayer, the swing of a bell, there exists a defiance that cannot be measured in coins or counted in harvests. It is a defiance written in endurance, in the quiet refusal to surrender to the cold, to hunger, to the ledger of impossibilities. And as the night settles fully over the village, there is a silence that is not empty but expectant, pregnant with stories yet to unfold, sacrifices yet to be revealed, and the unseen endurance that will carry them beyond this winter of despair. A child presses once more against the bell, lips grazing the cold metal, eyes wide in the half-light. The sound is soft, uncertain, yet it lingers, threading its way through the mist, through the cottages, through hearts grown weary but unbroken. It is a note of resilience, a delicate promise that life persists where shadow has fallen thickest. In that single swing, the story of the village, of survival, of hunger, of fear, and of the quiet courage that binds them together, is distilled into a moment both fragile and eternal. A bridge to the chapters yet to come, where the struggle deepens, where sacrifices mount, and where endurance, unseen yet undeniable, becomes the measure of all that remains. Through the thick veil of smoke rising from the communal ovens, the village appears, hesitant, like a mirage born of fevered dreams. Timbers bow under years of neglect, their blackened beams whispering of storms endured and winters survived. Roof tiles lie broken, scattered across the mud-slick ground, half buried in straw and frost. The air is heavy, carrying the acrid tang of smoke, the damp sweetness of decay, and the faint, lingering aroma of grain long stored and now sour. Each breath is a reminder of the tenuous grasp life maintains here. A mother sits by the doorway of a hut, her body curled like a broken vessel. She presses her frozen hand to her cheek, seeking warmth, but the chill runs through her fingers, past the skin, to the fragile bones of her child who sleeps beside her. Its ribs jut sharply beneath threadbare wool, each inhalation a soft rattle of emptiness. She rocks ever so slightly, murmuring prayers no god seems to hear, tracing a line of hope across the child's fevered brow. The smoke curls into her hair like dark threads of memory, filling her with both comfort and sorrow. In the shadow of the granary, men gather, voices brittle as dry twigs snapping underfoot. Their whispers carry across the open square, slipping between the cracks of timber and stone. They speak of plague, of the markets long shuttered, of cattle gone, their absence echoing in the hollow of empty barns. The words hang in the cold air, a brittle skeleton of past prosperity. Eyes dart from one neighbor to another, seeking reassurance, finding only reflection of their own fear mirrored in ash-stained faces. A glint of rusted iron catches the dim light, a sickle abandoned in haste, a relic of harvests that promised sustenance but delivered only sorrow. Inside the huts, a quieter struggle unfolds. Candles, stubby and uneven, burn low, their smoke curling upward in prayerful spirals. Hands stir pottage thickened with thistle and nettle, the meager leaves floating like green hope in a brown broth. These rituals, small and stubborn, tether the villagers to their humanity. A scrape of knife against wood, the careful arrangement of bread crumbs, the whisper of protective words over a sleeping infant, each gesture a rebellion against despair, a quiet defiance against the encroaching void. The walls of the huts hold memories like shadows. The laughter of children, now ghosted, the sharp scent of livestock mingling with the earth, the creak of carts on uneven lanes. In these silent chronicles, the villagers find solace. They do not speak of what has been lost in numbers, too great a weight, but in fragments. A button from a father's coat, a torn sleeve from a brother, a hat left behind in flight from fever. Each fragment carries a story, a heartbeat, a small claim that life endures even as the earth seems intent on swallowing it whole. Outside, the wind scours the lanes, carrying with it a bite of frost and a whisper of snow. Footsteps mark the mud in shallow impressions, soon to be swallowed by the icy ground, leaving no trace of passage. A solitary figure emerges, shoulders hunched, cloak wrapped tightly, eyes fixed on the horizon. The movement is deliberate yet hesitant, every step a negotiation with the biting cold. The snowflakes cling briefly to hair and lashes, melting into droplets that slide down to soil already frozen with neglect. In this gesture, both fearful and defiant, is the essence of endurance. The figure carries the weight of a village on shoulders bent but unbroken, a living tether between past losses and a hope as fragile as frost. From the granary's shadow, a faint murmur rises. Prayers, curses, and whispered bargains with unseen powers. The villagers speak to spirits and saints alike, hoping for mercy or at least distraction from the gnawing hunger. Each flicker of candlelight is a small rebellion against the dark, a refusal to vanish quietly. In this interplay of shadow and flame, the village asserts its presence, its stubborn insistence on continuity, even as the wind strips color from walls and frost etches its cold signature across timbers. The sounds of labor linger, though the harvest has long since failed. Saws groan against timber, hammers tap with hollow resonance, and in the distance, the tolling of the abbey bells reminds all of the passing days. Each peal marks absence, decay, and the slow accumulation of despair, Yet it also underscores persistence. Time continues, indifferent to suffering, but in its indifferent rhythm, there is opportunity. Tiny, imperceptible, and yet alive. In the kitchens, hands tremble over clay bowls, dividing portions that vanish before they satisfy. The simmering pottage, thick with weeds and roots, fills nostrils with a bitter perfume. Faces close to the pot inhale, tasting more hope than sustenance. The act of feeding, though meager, is sacred, a pledge that humanity remains even when nature and disease conspire against it. Whispered songs, half-forgotten prayers, a lullaby for the sleeping child. They mingle with the rising smoke, forming a fragile tapestry that binds life to memory. And yet, the village is not still. Beyond the threshold of each hut, life insists. Birds stir in frozen branches, a dog scratches at the snow, and the solitary figure presses forward, shoulders square against the winter's bite. The path ahead is uncharted, swallowed by white and silence, but the figure's gaze is unwavering. Each step speaks of courage measured not in grand deeds but in the simple act of moving forward when every instinct urges retreat. This is survival distilled to its essence, a slow, relentless defiance against the erosion of body and spirit. The day wanes, shadows stretch like dark fingers across the village square, and a cold quiet settles. The smoke from the ovens curls lazily upward, dissolving into the pale winter sky. The mother still cradles her child. The men still whisper of lost markets, and the rituals inside the huts continue with steady precision. And through it all, the solitary figure on the snow-laden path becomes a symbol of fear held in check, of defiance against despair, and of the faint, unyielding pulse of life itself. The horizon waits, vast and indifferent, yet inviting. Footprints vanish in frost, but the journey is marked by courage, small yet undeniable. And in that quiet assertion, in the frozen breath of winter and the flicker of candlelight, the village's story moves onward, toward endurance, toward unknown trials, toward a tomorrow that is not promised, but possible. A gust of wind sweeps through the skeletal orchards, bending bare branches like arthritic fingers against a leaden sky. The air is sharp, carrying with it the scent of iron and cold earth. A hound whimpers from the edge of a cracked field, its ribs visible beneath a patchwork coat, eyes fixed on shadows only it seems to see. The harvest is long gone. The soil is dry and fractured, fissures yawning like the mouths of the starving. Villagers drift along the narrow paths, their movements careful, economical, as if even a stumble could cost them their fragile endurance. Baskets hang from their arms, empty now, but once filled with the promise of sustenance. Now just rattling bones in the wind. Inside the cottages, the world is smaller, warmer, yet weighted. Wet wool drapes over shoulders, clinging damply to skin. The smell of fermented grain and smoke curls upward, wrapping around the low ceilings in a domestic veil. It is comforting in a way, but laced with despair, the faint warmth a cruel reminder of what little remains. A young boy kneels beside a wooden table, fingertips tracing the grooves of a crucifix worn smooth by generations of whispered prayers. He murmurs the words without full understanding, as if the motions themselves could summon protection, coax life back into the cold, unyielding earth. Beside him, his mother's hands, gnarled by years of toil and frostbite, tremble. She divides a single turnip with meticulous care, carving portions that are smaller than any heart could find satisfying, yet essential for survival. Through the frost-thickened windows, the church bell tower rises, its shadow slanting across frozen mud. It cuts the village in two, one side huddled in fear, the other in hope. The bell itself does not toll, its voice silenced by snow and decay, yet it is ever present, a silent witness to the intertwining of faith and despair. Each object in the village is a relic of necessity and symbolism. A cracked mug sits on the windowsill, enamel chipped and darkened by time. A needle, bent from overuse, rests atop a spool of frayed thread. The threadbare cloak draped over a child's shoulders is more than clothing. It is a fragile shield against frost, against hopelessness, against the slow gnawing of hunger. Every item is a story, every worn surface a testament to resilience carved out of suffering. Beyond the walls of the cottages, the wind carries whispers through the streets, threading between the low stone houses and broken fences. The villagers move with measured quiet, avoiding unnecessary exertion. Every step is an effort, every breath drawn with careful consideration. Even in their silence, there is communication. A glance exchanged over a simmering pot, the tilt of a head toward a distant horizon. They share in the invisible burden of survival, a silent covenant sealed in endurance rather than words. A small dog pads along the frozen paths, sniffing at shadows, offering companionship in a world otherwise hollowed by scarcity. In the fields, the skeletal remains of orchards stretch toward the gray sky. Branches groan in the wind, brittle as old bones. Birds circle in small, silent constellations, wary of the villagers who scatter them, wary of a world that offers less and less each passing season. At the village edge, a woman kneels on the frozen ground, her hands shaking as she scatters crumbs. Her gesture is simple, almost fragile, yet it carries weight beyond the act itself. The birds descend hesitantly, pecking at the offerings, unaware of the meaning she imbues. This is a small rebellion against emptiness, a whisper of generosity in a world that has demanded all. It is hope, tender and fleeting, painted across frost and mud. Inside, the hearth crackles with a faint, reluctant warmth. The mother watches her children, the boy still tracing his crucifix, the girl pulling a frayed blanket closer around her shoulders. Her eyes reflect the firelight, flickering with fatigue and resolve, knowing that each day survived is both victory and burden. Conversations are minimal, words are precious and spare. Sometimes, a sigh speaks more than sentences ever could. The rhythms of life are dictated by need, by hunger, by the slow, grinding insistence of time in a land stripped bare. Even as the villagers endure, shadows of secrecy lurk. Whispers in corners speak of barter and theft, of small betrayals carried out to stave off death. The landscape itself seems complicit, the cold, the mud, the silence pressing in, shaping choices with a subtle but inexorable force. Yet in these acts, in these quiet reckonings, there is a strange heroism. The overlooked, mothers, children, the old, the weak, carry weight that the world refuses to acknowledge. Their courage is unremarked, yet it is the backbone of the village, the sinew holding together the fragile fabric of existence. A crow lands on a fence post, shaking its wings against the wind, a single black figure against silver sky. Its eyes reflect a clarity the villagers cannot afford themselves. In its watchfulness, there is a reminder that the world sees everything, remembers everything, and yet offers no reprieve. The villagers move on, careful steps along frozen mud and cracked fields, their eyes fixed on horizons they do not dare to name. The mother returns to her children, the turnip portioned, the bread rationed, the quiet acts of care multiplied until they fill the space with the faint hum of persistence. Night creeps across the village, slow as a cat on padded paws. Torches flicker against walls, casting long, trembling shadows. Smoke rises from chimneys, curling like restless spirits, carrying the scent of stale bread and dying fire. Silence descends, punctuated only by the wind's whisper, the hound's soft whine, the occasional scrape of a basket against frozen ground. Dreams are light, hesitant, for the body knows that hunger and cold do not rest. Even sleep carries the weight of survival, a fragile thread connecting consciousness to the next day's endurance. At the edge of the village, the woman who scattered crumbs remains. She leans against the wind, hands raw and red, watching the birds wheel and rise. Her gesture is now memory and symbol, a testament to the quiet heroism that endures unnoticed. The world is stark, barren, yet within this small act lies defiance, a seed of hope sown in frost and shadow. It is a reminder that even when life is stripped to its bones, even when faith is intertwined with despair, the human spirit persists. The village sleeps, huddled beneath thin blankets and thicker fears, while the wind continues its relentless sweep, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and distant forests. Tomorrow will bring the same struggle, the same delicate dance between scarcity and endurance. And yet, the crumbs remain, the crucifix remains, the fractured lives stitched together by invisible threads of courage, loyalty, and unspoken love. In these quiet acts, in the tremble of hands, in the small kindnesses that seem to vanish in the frost, the story of survival continues, ready to unfold into new chapters of secrecy, endurance, and the uncelebrated heroism of the overlooked. The river runs sluggish, a thin ribbon of ice-laced water reflecting the ashen sky. Its surface shivers under the weight of winter, each crackle of ice a whispered warning. A cart drifts along the frost-hardened path, wheels uneven, splintered, groaning beneath the burden of empty sacks. The wood creaks like a living thing, protesting against the cold, against the hunger it carries. The villagers move with measured steps, faces hidden beneath woolen hoods, pausing mid-stride to listen. The abbey bell tolls from afar, solemn and unyielding, and the wind murmurs through thatched roofs, a soft, accusing sigh. Children's laughter, once a bright river of sound, has dwindled to coughs and the occasional groan of the ailing. Life has thinned, pressed low under the weight of snow and scarcity. Inside the huts, smoke curls from earthen ovens, faint and stubborn, rising to meet the heavy air. Sparse root vegetables stew slowly in iron pots, their aroma a thin, teasing promise. Hands dip into boiling water, stirring, mending, preparing meals that cannot fill the belly. The tactile world is sharp and unrelenting, frost biting through gloves to pale, chapped fingers, straw scratching against skin, rough wool pressed to cheeks pale as stone. Each breath carries the sting of cold, each step crunches against frost-hardened earth, a chorus of survival echoing beneath a sky that offers no mercy. In the courtyard, a small bird flutters against the eaves, its wings catching weak light, a fragile shimmer of life in a world of muted grays. Freedom hovers just beyond reach, and yet the bird persists, as if daring the wind to defeat it. Hands remain busy, though each labor feels hollow. Washing, mending, digging. Rituals of endurance, gestures against inevitability. Every object speaks of the past. A broken plow leaning in the snow, the wood rough under frozen fingers. A cracked comb, its teeth worn by generations. The ledger of unpaid tithes, pages curling with damp and neglect. History is tangible here, pressed into the surfaces of daily toil. A reminder that the world moves onward even when its people falter. Voices break the stillness only rarely, low and cautious, like the scrape of iron against stone. A mother hums a lullaby, threadbare and trembling, to quiet a child's cough. Outside, the wind carries fragments of conversation, a mix of prayer, complaint, and whispered hope. Each sound is a tether to the world, a line connecting the living to something larger, something that persists even when hunger gnaws at the bones. And yet, silence dominates. an oppressive, waiting silence that drapes itself over the village like a gray shroud. A man stoops by the river's edge, scraping ice with a length of wood to scoop the murky water into a pail. His breath clouds the air, momentary ghosts rising and dispersing. The river offers sustenance and threat in equal measure. Drink to quell thirst, ice to claim the unwary. Children watch from the hut doorway, fingers gripping splintered frames, eyes wide, hearts thrumming with a fear they scarcely understand. Their small bodies are shadows of what they should be, ribs rising sharply beneath worn tunics. Hunger is etched into their bones as clearly as frost into the riverbank. Inside the dim huts, elders whisper of seasons past, recounting harvests that were once abundant, feasts that warmed bellies and hearts alike. Their words are soft against the crackling fire, carrying weight, memory, and grief. Every tale is a reminder. This is not the first winter to press the village low, and yet each day feels like a fight newly invented. Men and women move through the snow-laden paths with a quiet determination, their movements precise, necessary, yet always shadowed by exhaustion. In the market square, a small boy lifts a bundle of straw to his chest, its warmth fleeting against the cold. He glances toward the abbey bell, its tolling a rhythm of patience and endurance. Merchants' carts stand abandoned, wheels frozen stiff, goods buried beneath frost and ice. Even the dogs lie motionless, curled against the wind, their breaths slow and misting in the brittle air. Life continues, but in a suspended, fragile state, as if the village itself holds its breath. By the riverbank, a young girl appears, clutching a small loaf, waterlogged and soft. Her hands tremble as she presses it against her chest, the bread more symbol than sustenance. The wind carries her breath in a misty cloud, a visible whisper of defiance. She gazes at the sluggish water, at the ice that drifts like shards of glass, and for a fleeting moment, the world narrows to this fragile act, holding life against the cold, against hunger, against despair. Her eyes reflect the muted sun, and in them is the spark of courage, small but unyielding. Around her, the village continues its slow, methodical dance with survival. Women bend over washing, their faces drawn, but hands steady. Men repair fences, shovel paths, fortify doors against the inevitable. Every motion is laden with purpose, every movement a testament to resilience. History whispers through the wind, reminding them that the land endures, that their struggles are threads in an unbroken tapestry. The river, indifferent, flows onward, carrying ice and mud alike, and the girl's loaf floats in her hands, a fragile promise. The air is thick with stories untold, with deeds unseen, with prayers spoken into emptiness. Yet in this small girl, standing alone against the icy current, hope takes shape. Not the hope of plenty, but of survival, of courage, of small triumphs in a world that feels vast and unforgiving. Around her, the village moves, shadows and whispers shaping life in miniature gestures. A smile exchanged over a pot of soup, a hand pressed to a fevered forehead, a quiet nod of acknowledgement to shared suffering. Even as darkness begins to gather, the river glows with a pale light, reflecting the sky above and the hearts below. The girl's eyes linger on the water, tracing the ice and the driftwood, imagining a world beyond, imagining warmth and laughter and life reclaimed. And in that moment, fragile yet profound, the story stretches outward, from the mud-caked streets and smoke-stained huts to the hidden struggles of every villager, the unseen endurance of the weak, the unspoken courage of the hungry. Every heartbeat, every frostbitten step, every labor carried out under gray skies, weaves together the living tapestry of survival, binding the small and the great into the same fragile, relentless story. As she lifts her gaze from the loaf to the horizon, the first hints of twilight settle over the village. Shadows stretch long, brushing against frozen walls and thatched roofs. Somewhere, a bell tolls again, steady, unwavering, and in the hush of the winter air, in the quiet determination of hands and hearts, the girl stands. A solitary emblem of courage, of persistence, of life pressing stubbornly against despair. The river moves beside her, slow and unyielding, carrying with it the echoes of endurance, the murmur of community, and the silent, invisible struggles that define the rhythm of this small, frost-bound world. The cold presses, the wind moans, yet there is a pulse, a living, beating pulse in the hushed village, in the small acts of defiance, in the tender courage of a child holding a waterlogged loaf. And as she steps back from the river, the story widens. A tapestry of survival that will stretch beyond this frozen moment, into the unseen hours of toil, the quiet victories, the hidden suffering, and the resilient spirit that refuses to break. Mist hovers over the hollowed fields where wheat once grew tall, now reduced to brittle stubble, brittle as old bones. The cold seeps into the soil and into the skin, and the air carries the scent of wet earth, of decay, of a season that has betrayed the people who tilled it. Smoke curls lazily from feeble hearths, thin and gray, dissolving into the gray sky, as if the world itself mourns in silence. The villagers move like shadows among this muted landscape, their forms bent and slow, each step deliberate, as though the very act of walking requires negotiation with the wind, the frost, the weight of another day survived. Faces are maps of repeated hardship. Furrowed brows, eyes sunken beneath the sheltering bones of their skulls, mouths tight against the bitterness of hunger. Hands, cracked and blackened, carry tools and chores with the gravity of ritual, every gesture a testament to a fragile persistence. In the smithy, a blacksmith hammers at a sword that will never taste war. Its steel rings, hollow and insistent, echoing off walls that have witnessed the slow attrition of life itself. Each strike is a heartbeat in a village holding on, a defiance against silence, yet it is a song of lost purpose. Sparks rise like fleeting hopes, only to vanish into the cold air, and the hammer's rhythm becomes a lonely drum, counting the days no one dares to name. Outside, a child presses bare feet into frozen mud, toes splayed against earth that bites and resists. Small bones imprint the ground through ragged leggings, the flesh beneath pale and stubborn. The child pauses, head tilted toward the faint murmur of the wind through broken fences, a sound that carries both warning and promise, a whisper of something that once was, or might never be again. The village square is a stage of absence. A bell hangs crookedly, its rope frayed and worn. When rung, it emits a tone that is neither joyful nor mournful, but something in between, unyielding, almost accusatory, a call to witness what remains. The few who respond do so slowly, as if their bodies, and perhaps their very spirits, remember the weight of each toll. They gather for communal work, for prayer, for a semblance of life that refuses to die. Threadbare cloaks flap in the wind like exhausted banners. Rusted knives hang at belts as silent witnesses. Clay cups chipped and blackened from years of ceaseless use are lifted to lips that taste only water and memory. Every object, every gesture, carries a tactile, almost sacred significance. A record of endurance written in the language of scarcity and necessity. Women move between huts, carrying pails of water or bowls of meager stew, their eyes fixed somewhere beyond the smoke rising from hearths. Conversations are sparse. Words are expensive, and laughter rarer than bread. The village feels as if it is holding its breath, the very soil beneath trembling with quiet resignation. Children learn early that joy must be hidden, that curiosity must be measured, that hunger is an omnipresent teacher with no mercy. Yet they play in stolen moments, chasing ragged scraps, their laughter brittle but defiant, a counterpoint to the pervasive ache that grips the earth and its people alike. The blacksmith pauses mid-swing, wiping sweat and soot from a brow caked with the residue of labor and endurance. His gaze drifts to the window, where the horizon is nothing but gray and indistinct. He sees the empty fields, the skeletal trees, the whisper of wind over frozen mud. Somewhere in that expanse lies the memory of abundance, of summers heavy with grain and sun, and a pang of loss presses against his chest, not yet despair, but the precursor. He returns to the hammer, each strike a protest, each spark a defiance. In this act, simple and repetitive, he asserts his presence, his right to matter, however diminished. In another corner of the village, a mother tucks her youngest child beneath a fraying blanket, her hands lingering against the child's shoulder, as if to transfer warmth from herself to the small body. She whispers old lullabies, songs of rivers that once ran full and golden, of skies that bore no gray, of harvests that fed more than mere survival. Her voice is soft, nearly swallowed by the wind, yet it carries the weight of memory, of hope woven into despair. She imagines a future she may never see, and in that imagining, the act of endurance transforms into something sacred, a quiet resistance against the erasure that surrounds them. In the square, the bell is struck again, its cry cutting through the silence. Villagers gather, forming a human mosaic of persistence, a fragile testament to survival. The old and the young, the sick and the strong, all converge in a ritual as ancient as the earth beneath their feet. Hands pass baskets of grain, hands check on neighbors, hands lift clay cups in silent toasts to life that continues despite itself. Here, the texture of human resilience is palpable, threaded through touch, gaze, and the shared weight of hunger. Every movement is both a record and a prayer. The camera of memory lingers on the elderly woman by her hearth. Her fingers trace the rim of a chipped cup, her eyes following the smoke curling upward, twisting into shapes of yesterday's joys and sorrows. In that moment, her gaze holds the history of the village, of seasons that have burned and starved, of families that have vanished and lingered. The flicker of firelight illuminates lines carved by decades of endurance, by loss softened only by habit, by sorrow tempered by quiet heroism. She does not speak. She merely exists as the bridge between what was and what must come, her presence a reminder that life, even in its most diminished form, persists. Around her, the village breathes in unison with the land, a frozen pulse of survival, of effort measured in small victories, of despair softened by memory. The wind whispers through stubble, rattles the loose tiles on roofs, and carries with it the scent of wet earth and distant smoke. Somewhere beyond the village, the world moves indifferently, but within this hallowed place, every life is an echo of courage, of suffering endured in silence, of a community bound not by abundance, but by the invisible threads that tether them to one another. As the last light fades, shadows stretch long across the frozen mud. The bell hangs still, silent now, a relic awaiting the next toll. The villagers retreat to their homes, to the sparse warmth of flickering hearths, to the fragile cocoon of night. Yet in the hush, in the thick smoke of the last fires, in the quiet sigh of wind through skeletal fields, there is something that cannot be extinguished: memory, resilience, the faint glimmer of hope that will carry the village into the next day, into the next chapter of struggle, endurance, and unspoken heroism. The elderly woman's eyes linger on the smoke rising, tracing invisible paths into the unknown, bridging the sorrow of the past with the faint pulse of what must come next. A frost-laden morning drapes the village in a blanket of silver and gray. Each roof, each crooked timber, bears a quiet sheen, the ice catching what little light dares to pierce the low-hanging clouds. The wind moves through the streets like a living thing, carrying whispers of the dead. Voices that once carried laughter, command, or sorrow now drift as fragile echoes, twisting among the crooked cottages and dead hedgerows. They linger in the frozen air, haunting the breath of those still bound to this place, reminding them of what has been lost. The village holds its own quiet vigil, as if the frost itself is a mournful sentinel. Men move through the streets with the precision of ritual, sharpening sickles against stone, the metallic rasp mingling with the hiss of frost under boot soles. Muscles tense and release, the rhythmic scraping a brittle heartbeat against the silence, but their faces betray the hollow core of exhaustion. Hunger gnaws beneath their skin, a silent predator, leaving bones to ache and hands to shake. There is no hurry, only the slow, mechanical cadence of survival. Every swing of the blade, every methodical stroke across flint, feels like a prayer, an attempt to reclaim control over a world that has grown unforgiving. Women kneel over smoky hearths, their hands stirring watery broths that refuse to conceal the bitterness of scarcity. The faint smell of herbs, ash, and simmering root vegetables hangs heavy, mingling with the frost that creeps beneath doors and window sills. Their eyes, quick and alert, flick to the children who press against frozen glass, palms leaving fleeting prints on the icy pane. Outside, the fields stretch barren, a lattice of frost that twists in patterns resembling bones, a landscape of memory and loss. Children's breaths fog the glass as they trace these ghostly shapes with longing, understanding that this land offers only lessons in absence. Every sound carries weight. The rattle of doors on their hinges becomes a punctuation of fear. The scrape of hooves across cobbles marks the passage of those who must travel despite the cold. Distant caws of crows speak as messengers of hunger, their black silhouettes slicing the pale horizon. Even silence feels purposeful, a living, waiting thing that watches and judges. Here, time stretches in jagged increments. One day becomes a week a month, each moment a repetition of endurance. Life has narrowed, funneled into the necessity of survival, and yet, in this compression, a peculiar resilience has begun to grow, delicate as frost flower petals clinging to winter's edge. Objects, simple and ordinary, are imbued with significance. A rusted key, discarded once, now weighs heavy in the palm of a man's calloused hand. It promises stories, hidden doors, perhaps secrets from another life. A tattered book lies open on a window ledge, its pages frozen and brittle, ink smeared by condensation, yet it breathes the faint warmth of memory. A lone candle flickers stubbornly against the cold, its thin light quivering as if whispering reassurance to those who gather near. In these small artifacts, the villagers find connection. Traces of lives that were full once, fragments of comfort, proof that humanity persists even when the land turns cruel and silent. The wind carries more than whispers. It carries the weight of history. Frost cracks along the roof beams like brittle bones. It seeps into cracks between stones, claiming corners where warmth once lingered. Smoke rises in thin, hesitant spirals from chimneys, curling like fingers in prayer, seeking mercy from skies that offer none. The village breathes in rhythm with the earth's unyielding cold, each inhale tinged with both fear and necessity. Every moment is measured by small victories. A hearth that refuses to go out, a child that survives the night, a sack of grain that lasted a week longer than expected. Children, fragile yet unbowed, press their faces to frost-laced windows, their eyes reflecting a mixture of awe and terror. The skeletal patterns in the fields become a canvas upon which they trace stories of ancestors long gone, of harvests that will not return, of hopes too delicate for winter to consume entirely. They watch the adults move through rituals of work and survival, learning early the brutal mathematics of hunger and patience. Their laughter, when it comes, is brief and brittle, a sound that pierces the weight of gray silence like a shard of light. And yet, amid the frozen despair, there are moments that do not bow to the frost. A woman's hand lingers a moment longer on a child's shoulder, pressing warmth into a cold spine. A man pauses mid-swing, letting the sickle rest against the ice-crusted soil, and listens, really listens, to the whisper of wind through bare branches, as though it carries counsel or warning. These moments are fleeting, yet they hold a quiet, stubborn affirmation. Even when life narrows to its essentials, even when grief seeps into every corner, there is still the pulse of hope, fragile but present. At the heart of the village, a solitary figure stands with arms outstretched toward the sky, embracing both despair and mercy, as if drawing the frost itself into a silent communion. The fingers are red and cracked, the face pale beneath a hood stiff with ice, yet the gesture is unyielding. It is a supplication, a defiance, and a benediction all at once. Around this figure, the mist curls and shifts, carrying with it the faintest trace of possibility, an unspoken promise that courage, though unrecorded and uncelebrated, endures. The cold is not just a presence but a witness, acknowledging the quiet heroism of those who stand against the unrelenting void. Here, in this frost-bound morning, the village becomes both stage and actor in an unspoken drama of resilience. Every gesture, every breath, every echo carries the weight of countless untold stories. Hunger sharpens senses, labor strengthens resolve, and memory imbues objects and rituals with the weight of meaning. The frost may linger, the wind may howl, yet beneath it all pulses the stubborn heartbeat of survival, threading through the skeletal landscape like an invisible tether to life itself. And as the wind rises once more, sweeping through streets and fields, the solitary figure tilts their head to catch the first faint light filtering through gray clouds. The village exhales with them, as if sharing in a silent acknowledgement that even in despair, even in absence, there is the fragile, unyielding seed of hope. It is this seed that will carry them into the next struggle, into deeper winters, into famine, into the quiet, unrecorded courage that history may forget, but which the heart remembers in every frost-crusted dawn. The frost-laden village does not speak of victories or glory. It speaks instead in shadows and whispers, in the cold press of stone and bone. And in that quiet, the story of humanity endures, unbroken, trembling, and unrelentingly alive, waiting for the next chapter to rise from the silver-gray silence. Through the veil of fog, the village emerges like a ghost of memory, silent and suspended. The morning light struggles against the gray mist, revealing thatched roofs slick with frost, walls bowed from centuries of winter, and narrow paths pressed into mud by the weary passage of countless feet. The air is thick with the bitter tang of damp straw, smoke curling from blackened chimneys, and the sour sharpness of milk gone past its season. It clings to the skin and lodges in the throat, an invisible weight pressing upon every breath, reminding all who inhale it of the slow, grinding struggle that defines their days. In the yards, cattle shuffle forward, thin flanks rising and falling like the shallow chests of the living who feed them. Their eyes, clouded and hollow, catch the feeble light, reflecting the same exhaustion mirrored in the faces of the villagers. Each creature is a vessel of survival, yet barely so. Men cluster near splintered fences, their hands scarred by labor and unkempt from the unrelenting cold. Words are few and careful, low murmurs of failed crops, of fields stripped bare by frost, of disease gnawing through bodies like rats in a granary. The silence between them is louder than any shout, a quiet communion of shared despair and stubborn endurance. Women move through this landscape like ghosts tethered to duty, stitching garments from tattered cloth, every needle a strike against the void. Their fingers are stiff, cracked by frostbite, yet precise, tracing patterns as if mapping hope into every stitch. Low prayers hum under their breath, words slipping into the air like smoke, curling around doorways, vanishing into the fog. Each chant is a plea to gods distant or absent, an attempt to summon mercy from forces that do not answer. They work not only to shield bodies from the cold, but to anchor themselves against the erosion of hope. Children, untouched by the weight of suffering yet painfully aware of it, drift through frozen patterns in the mud and frost. They draw lines with sticks, eyes wide with imagination that refuses the world's bitterness. Theirs is a fragile rebellion against despair. A swirl of snow, a bird's fleeting shadow, a sudden laugh at a puddle frozen into a prism of light. They remind the village of what is possible even in the grip of famine. That life, however brittle, persists. Every detail of the village speaks its own language of endurance. A frayed rope hangs limp from a post, its fibers split and worn but still holding. A bird perches silently on a rafter, its head tilted, watching the humans as they pass below, indifferent yet present, a witness to suffering. Reeds bend in the wind, low and unbroken, whispering secrets of survival through their quivering stalks. These small elements form a tapestry of metaphor, fragility and resilience entwined, each thread a testament to the village's quiet, relentless will. At the center of this scene stands a solitary figure, kneeling by the door of a hut. The gesture is simple yet profound, the last crumbs of bread offered to the earth itself. Fingers press the scant sustenance into the soil, a humble covenant between human and land. It is both surrender and defiance, a recognition of scarcity and a plea for continuity. The action is silent, almost invisible, yet it resonates through the village like the tolling of a bell, a heartbeat that binds past to present, despair to hope. The village exhales a collective breath, a rhythm of life forced into patience and ritual. Each day repeats the same cycle of labor and scarcity, yet within it blooms a stubborn insistence. The human spirit, though bent by famine, bends without breaking. Smoke rises from chimneys, thin and spiraling, carrying with it the scent of charred wood and meager meals, a reminder that survival is a daily ceremony, small and ritualized. The cold bites, the wind howls, but life endures, tracing the fragile contours of existence against a backdrop of loss. In the men's eyes, one sees the weight of unspoken stories. Brothers gone to the plague, neighbors who vanished into the forest in search of sustenance, the fields that promised grain but yielded only stone. There is grief, yes, but also a stubborn memory of abundance and the faint spark of stubborn hope. Every gesture, the leaning on a fence post, the careful measurement of dwindling rations, the whispered exchange of news, is a negotiation with despair, a contract signed daily between the living and the dead, between what has been lost and what might yet be saved. Even the village's silence has texture. It presses into the ears, thick and palpable, as if the fog itself absorbs sound. Steps on frozen mud, the creak of a door, the distant lowing of cattle, each a note in the somber music of survival. The village exists not merely as a collection of huts and people, but as a living organism, every motion a pulse in the heart of endurance. And yet, for all the hardship, there is a fragile poetry in its rhythms. The faint curl of smoke, the shimmer of frost on a roof, the breath of a child rising in the cold air, moments that whisper of beauty amid suffering. As the figure straightens, eyes lifted to the gray sky, there is a quiet reckoning. The offering to the earth is done, the moment of humility complete. And yet, it opens a doorway, not only into the hut, but into the larger, haunting story of human tenacity. Outside, the fog drifts through the village like a slow river, carrying with it the scent of earth, smoke, and the faint echo of prayers. It is a veil, yes, but also a threshold. Beyond it lies the vast, unyielding landscape of medieval famine, of sacrifice, of loyalty tested by hunger, of the silent, stubborn persistence of a people whose lives are measured in small gestures of survival. In the hush of this early hour, the village waits. Every roof, every frozen path, every shadowed corner bears witness to a story that is older than memory, yet as immediate as the frost on the window. And in this waiting, there is both dread and a fragile, unspoken promise that life, no matter how thin, persists. The last crumbs in the earth are more than food. They are a covenant, a signal that even in the darkest winter, even under the heaviest hand of fate, the human spirit endures. The fog shifts, revealing the path forward, the road of sacrifice and courage that stretches beyond the village's boundaries, into the heart of a medieval world shaped by hunger, fear, and an unbreakable will to survive.